gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
all in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast, with Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. LaBeat.tb. It's gonna be sick.
It is Friday evening. That was Tony Marinaro's intro, but I am Matt Ohayon, the Hebrew Hammer, and welcome to the Sick Podcast. We got a couple of housekeeping things that I got to take care of before we get to our guest of the evening. First things first. Big shout out to Dollar Des Ormeaux' own Devin Levi, or Hebrew Foundation School's own Devin Levi. That's right. I got something in common with an NHL goaltender, and that is that we are from the same hometown and we went to the same elementary school. And right now, if you want to check it out on Twitter, I have a poll up on Twitter of what is more impressive: 5 touchdowns in a 15-minute recess, or winning in your first NHL start. That's right. Devin Levi with a 32 save win in Buffalo's 3-2 overtime victory against the New York Rangers. Just a great game to watch, and it's great to see a Montrealer, no less another Hebrew Hammer, bringing some glory to our city. All right, another thing that I got to do is, this happened to me last night. I was out for dinner out in Rosemont. A friend of mine then suggests that we stop by a bakery in the Mile End. That bakery is known as Chesky's, for those who know it. And, I do my usual order, and then as I step outside, a Hasidic Jew stops me, and he goes, "Hey, are you Matt Ohayon?" And I'm going, "Oh man, where do I know this guy from? I know a lot of people, but I can't keep track." And he goes, I go, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I watch you on the Sick Podcast." "Oh, no way. Oh my God. What's your name? Who are you?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm the son-in-law of Mr. Chetsky." I go, "No way." So if you're listening, you'll be listening tomorrow on Saturday after Shabbat, but happy you are a part of the Sick Army, as we just keep getting bigger and bigger. All right. Let's do this thing. Let's welcome him in. The Canadiens, since we last spoke, have totaled 2 wins and 2 losses. So let's talk to him again. Why not? Mr. Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette. Stu, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm not bad. I'm not bad, especially getting recognized on the streets of the Mile End, where not exactly streets that I roam around too often. So that was pretty cool. Has that ever happened to you where, people just come up to you all the time now and just go, "Hey, are you Stu Cowan from the Gazette?"
It happens once in a while. I've had people ask me if I was Mark Messier a couple of times too, which is kind of funny. But it happens. Not that often, but it happens once in a while.
All right. And just another note from that Sabres game. Each Buffalo Sabre, they get to pick their own goal song. And tonight I learned that Jeff Skinner, who scored the game-winning goal for the Buffalo Sabres, his goal song, you would never believe this, is "I Want to Dance with Somebody" by Whitney Houston. So that was also really fun to learn. Stu, okay, wait.
That's a great idea. Fantastic.
I think it's great, and I was laughing when he scored, and I heard the song start playing. What would be, just off the top of your head, what would be your goal song if you got to pick?
Oh man, that's a good one. It'd be something from the Stones, I guess. Can't think off the top of it.
If it's from the Stones, you got to give me "Can't You Hear Me Knocking." That's
No,
that's my all-time favorite Stones
I
song.
like Honky Tonk Woman's one of my favorite Stone songs, so maybe that would be it.
Well, there you go. That's not a bad choice. So, okay, so let's before we talk about news and notes around the NHL, let's talk Montreal Canadiens, because the last time we spoke, the Canadiens were entering a game, probably well, it didn't turn out to be the biggest game of the tank battle, so it seems, for the Canadiens, but they ended up beating the Columbus Blue Jackets 8-2. Thankfully, it wasn't the other way around in Columbus, because to spare your ears from the
I've been there a few times. Yeah.
Then, I mean, I guess I feel like everyone was kind of expecting a letdown against Buffalo, but again, this team, it's been the story all year. Just the effort level just does not drop.
Well, last night's game against Florida is one of the very few games this year where the effort level wasn't there. Like, very few, like a handful of times. And Marty St. Louis, one of the things I really like about Marty is he's very honest. And as he said, here you have a team that's fighting to get the wild card spot against a team who the game before was officially eliminated from the playoffs. And it's just natural human instinct that one team's going to probably be more motivated in that situation than the other team. Canadiens see the finish line now. There's 6 games left. It's just human instinct. Guys probably don't want to get hurt right now, going into their summer or whatnot. But I think they'll bounce back again the next game. It's as I said, there's only a handful of times this season that the Canadiens haven't competed. And you can say that about every single team in the NHL. Every team, like even the Boston Bruins, as good as they are, I'm sure there's 3 or 4 games this season where they just haven't been there and haven't really competed. It happens. And as I said, it hasn't happened very often with this Canadiens team. Last night's game was one of those rare occasions. So it'll be interesting to see if St. Louis can get the guys fired up again for tomorrow night's game with Carolina. It's going to be a tough game. You got Kotkaniemi coming back. The last time they played here, he scored that winning goal in the shootout. But yeah, it's going to be it'll be a challenge for Ronnie. It's going to be a challenge for any coach when your team's gone through everything this team has gone through this year with injuries and whatnot. But there's still a lot of guys on the Canadiens who are trying to prove themselves that they belong in the NHL, that they deserve a spot for next year, that they at least deserve another look at training camp. So, as I said, I'd be surprised to see back-to-back games where their compete level isn't right at the top.
Sick Podcast brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Energy Transportation Group is a full leading logistics service provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. I knew I forgot to do something off the top of the show. I got too excited. Brewed in Quebec and a winner of a dozen international awards, Bittt, a Tibi beer, offers quality microbrewery beers with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. Bittt, a Tibi, embrace your true nature. All right. So yeah, I mean, that one against Florida, I feel like there was also some juice on the other side, because you have your best player's father kind of, he's playing like minor league hockey dad, just criticizing the team, and that's making more headlines than the actual team not performing. So yeah, I mean, Keith Tkachuk just going out, for those who don't know, calling the Florida Panthers soft. And then his son, the best player on the team, gets 4 points in the win. So, I mean, you got to think that just like also Florida they were ready to go for that one. I mean, and like you said, they got a playoff spot on the line.
And they were coming off a big win the night before. I watched the third period of that game when they were trailing the Leafs, and they tied it up and they won it in overtime. So they were, that was 4 huge points for Florida. And, they've won all 4 games against the Canadiens. So if they get into the playoffs, big reason is going to be because they picked up 8 points against the Canadiens. And of course, as we know, the Canadiens hold Florida's first round pick in next year's draft. So it'll be interesting to follow the rest of the way. If they don't get in the playoffs, the Canadiens know that they're going to have 2 picks in the top 16. And last night was a chance for them to help themselves do that, but they just didn't have it last night.
Right. And but you know what, though? It's if you just take a look at the odds, I mean, they really did themselves a big favor in at least in improving their draft choice chances to get the first overall with that loss against Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge swing. And, I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, you want the higher pick no matter what. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You don't want to have like 7 and 13 versus 5-1 or 14, whatever it may be,
Yeah,
whatever the case may be.
It's always a crapshoot too. I mean, I think we talked about last time I was on with you.
Yeah.
the Colorado Avalanche losing the draft lottery, being all upset, and then they got Cale Makar at 3 or 4, or whatever it was they picked him. So I mean, the draft is always a crapshoot. There's no such thing as a guarantee in the draft. Even Connor Bedard. I mean, Alexis Lafreniere a couple of years ago was supposed to be a generational type player, not maybe at the same level as Connor Bedard. You know, he's struggling with the Rangers. You know, Nail Yakupov, you go down, there's a lot of guys. I mean, I think Connor Bedard's going to be a really, really good hockey player. I'd be shocked if he's not. But that doesn't mean that if the Canadiens don't get the number 1 pick, they won't get a really, really good player at number 2, 3, or 4, wherever they end up.
Well, that's the thing. And you know what? That's a huge thing. And I think the biggest sign of, you know, as much as Canadiens fans, I think that we're seeing now more and more fans embracing and understanding that this isn't just going to be a 1-year thing. Just because there's new management, you're going to have a down year and then it's takeoff. I think they're realizing that more and more. And the best example of that is Kirby Dach, right? I mean, third overall pick, gets completely given up on by his organization. The guy's 21 years old and now he's taking off. It takes some people way longer than others.
And in the NHL, I mean, they draft kids so young at 18 years old. It's easy to forget how. I mean, Slavkovsky just turned 19 yesterday. You know, it was his birthday. Right. Kirby Dach's 21. It's easy to forget how young these kids are. You know, I have a 22-year-old son. A lot of the guys in the Canadiens are the same age as him or younger. It's easy to forget that sometimes. And Marty St. Louis had the quote about Kirby Dach. He says, "You don't give up on a 21-year-old. You know, it's too young." I mean, Kotkaniemi. You look at Kotkaniemi this season. I was looking at his stats this morning. He's doing much better. He's winning like 52% of his faceoffs. There was a time where that was a big concern. He's gotten bigger and stronger, obviously, as time has moved on. The Carolina Hurricanes, with that contract they give him, are banking on him continuing to develop under Rod Brindamore in the same way that the Canes are hoping young players will develop under Marty St. Louis. And they're banking on him becoming a bargain near the end of that contract that he signed. So, you know, I think Kotkaniemi's 22 now. So it's easy to forget how young some of these guys are. And that's what I think, you know, that's where Kent Hughes has been good at picking up guys like a Kirby Dach, where you see, you know, there's reasons he was a number 3 overall pick. He's a talented player. And, you know, now you got a coach who can get it out of him. And it's just a fresh start. And I was talking about this the other night with some of the other guys who cover the team. And Kirby, when he's interviewing him in scrums, it's hard to tell if he was sort of shy or nervous or what it is. He's not comfortable doing interviews. And one of the guys said, and I think he was right, he's probably just so used to being bashed in Chicago.
Yeah.
That his guard's up right away when he's doing interviews with the media. But he's sort of relaxed more as the season's gone on. And I think part of that is that he's, you know, he came here, he was criticized in Chicago. He came here, he had to prove himself again. You know, the team gave up on him. And he's done a really good job of doing that. And Marty St. Louis, I think, has been a really good coach, as he has been. You know, Cole Caulfield was a different player, right? After Dominic Ducharme got fired, it was like the new guy. It was like the Cole Caulfield that people remembered when he got drafted. So a whole big part of this Canadiens rebuild moving forward is just how Marty St. Louis can do that with the young players.
And you know what? They're putting a lot of stock into, you know, they're placing a lot of their chips into these young players, and not really we had an episode, you know, a couple weeks ago where one of our guests, Scott Matla, he said, you know, I would eat a hat if the Canadiens got Pierre-Luc Dubois this offseason. And you know what? I think his diet will be hat free, you know, come the end of the offseason, because it's just, you know, I really think that the more we hear about this front office, the more we see from them, there's just so many prospects in the pool that why would you go out and get a guy when you could just wait for one of your own to become that player that you're going to go out and get? Because the Canadiens aren't ready to take on a Pierre-Luc Dubois. So, I mean, I think it's just exciting times. And, you know, we saw it last night. I mean, granted, it wasn't exactly probably how he drew up his first NHL goal, but we saw it last night in Sean Farrell. I mean, guy scores his first goal on his first shot, and he played almost 15 minutes in his debut. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shot that never should have gone in. It was a brutal goal. But yeah, 15 minutes. The thing with Farrell is they list him at 5'9". I find that hard to believe. Seeing him and standing next to him, he looks smaller than Cole Caulfield. But it's a big jump from university hockey to the NHL for anyone. I mean, Cole Caulfield struggled at first, and you can't blame all of that on Dominic Ducharme. His system obviously didn't help Cole Caulfield as a young player coming in. But with Farrell, the other guys, you know, Pierre-Luc Dubois, you know, I can't erase from my mind that video of that shift in Columbus when he didn't want to play there anymore, and he just went out and like it was like an old timers guy just out.
Oh yeah, he dogged it.
And I was like, man, that to me, that's a taste that I can't get out of my mouth, and that's like a warning sign to me. Like, do you really want a guy like that who's? It's not, you're giving up on your teammates. Never mind that you're upset with the team. You're on the ice with your teammates, and that to me, that's a big warning, red flag. Maybe I'm putting too much weight on that. He hasn't had a great year this year in Winnipeg. He's been hurt also, but that whole Winnipeg team just seems dysfunctional right now. It's incredible how they've fallen off, and the coach calling out guys saying that if they think they're giving 100%, they're kidding themselves. They're not even close. So there's warning things there. I mean, it seems like he wants to play in Montreal, reading between the lines from the interviews when he was at the draft last year in Montreal. And, he's a big center that the Canadiens would probably have some interest in, but it'll be interesting moving forward what happens with him. I mean, I wouldn't, what are you going to sign him for? How much are you going to give him? They still got to sign Cole Caulfield. I'd be hesitant. I guess that's the word I'd use. I'd be hesitant about going after him right now.
Yeah, it's just the stage that the team is at, and I think it's a great segue into the article that you had out in the Gazette, which was you had a sit down with Geoff Molson, and he gave some pretty good nuggets, and I know that I will divulge the information to the masses that you sat down with him for 2 hours. So
I'm sure there was a little. It was a little.
Oh, was it? Okay,
a little under an hour. It was a little under an hour.
Oh, okay. So then Agnello fed me wrong information.
It was a little under an hour.
But an hour is still a lot of time to get some good information.
Well, I was surprised. It's going into it. I didn't know. Usually those things are about 20 minutes or so. And when I went in, Chantal Mackenby asked me, how much time do you need or you want? And I said, well, I usually try and get guys through 20 minutes. I realize these guys have busy schedules, but Geoff Molson was he had another meeting, which is what had to end just about an hour later. But it was close to an hour. So he was willing to answer all the questions I had. I had a list of them, and went in there not really knowing how it would go. I'd never had a one-on-one with Geoff Molson before, but it went very well. And he answered questions, honestly, I thought, and touched on a lot of different topics. And he used the word rebuild. At first, he sort of was hesitant to use it, and I asked him, I said, how come you guys are so afraid of just using the word rebuild? And he said, well, we're not. That's what it is. He said, we've had 5 rookie defensemen in the lineup for a lot of games this season. That's a rebuild. So it was sort of nice. Yeah, it is a rebuild. But I think the reason they were reluctant to use that word, and Kent Hughes has been reluctant, and Gorton's been reluctant. I think they just weren't sure when they started this how the fans were going to, if they were going to accept it. And as Molson said in the column I wrote, he says, he's owned this team for 14 years, and he says he's 52 years old. He said, in my lifetime, I've never heard the Canadiens ever use the word rebuild. And he's using it. He's the first one. And as I wrote in the column, it's what this team needed. It's what this franchise needed at this point. It had to be rebuilt because they were just – Marc Bergevin was plugging holes here and plugging holes there, but there was the vision was Carey Price is going to stand on his head and hopefully we win 2-1. That was basically what the plan was, or the vision seemed to be so many times. So now they have a solid plan in place. They have some really smart people running the organization. Molson had another good quote. He's saying with Marc Bergevin, 9 years in that position is a long time, and it is. I mean, it's a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of dealing with media in 2 languages, and I think it got to Marc Bergevin at the end. I really think it did, but it was time to move on, and Molson realized that. And I had asked them, the first round of the playoffs in 2021 against the Maple Leafs when they were being outshot 13-2 in overtime, and it looked like there's no hope in hell they were going to win. They'd been using only 4 defense. They couldn't get the puck out of their zone. Their defensemen looked exhausted. They won that game. They go on to the Stanley Cup final, and I said, if Carey Price let in one of those goals and shots in overtime, and you were eliminated in the first round, would this rebuild have started then? And he paused for a second and went, well, possibly, but he said that didn't happen. And then. Then they go on to win to get to the Stanley Cup final, and in the back of his mind, Molson, he realizes, he said he used the word vulnerable. The Canes were vulnerable going in. I mean, without COVID, they wouldn't even got into the playoffs that year. He realized the team was vulnerable, but then you go to the Stanley Cup final. How do you start firing guys and blowing up a team that just went to the Stanley Cup final, even though big reason was Carey Price? So we sort of let things play out the way it was, but he knew in the back of his mind that this team needed change. And then everything fell apart, right? I mean, Carey Price got hurt, Shea Weber got hurt, they went on the terrible slide, the players stopped playing for Dominic Ducharme, and it just got really ugly. So, for a first full season of a rebuild, it's been an impressive start to the first year of the rebuild. It's not easy, though. It's not going to be easy moving forward. There's no guarantee this is going to work, but at least Hughes and Gorton and St. Louis and Molson all seem to be on the same page. They have a plan. They're going to stick to it, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, well, then there'll be another GM and another coach coming in.
You know what I find really encouraging about all this right now, and especially this is a testament to Geoff Molson's character and basically how he handled Marc Bergevin's tenure, because I feel like there were a couple times during his tenure where fans had enough, and that really started after PK Subban got traded. But even before that, I could remember there was because Marc Bergevin would never refuse to fire Michel Therrien. And then, there were just like a lot of instances throughout 9 years where for someone who was there 9 years, there was a lot of hate towards that person from fans, and Geoff Molson stuck by him. So I feel like because they committed to using the R word of rebuild, and that's right from Geoff Molson's mouth. He's going to give Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon and Martin St. Louis the proper time they need. Of course he's going to keep an eye and say,
as Molson said,
going on.
Toronto's tried to rebuild. New Jersey, there's other teams. Edmonton has two of the best players in the NHL. It's tough in a 32 team league with a salary cap. I've said this before, just getting into the playoffs is an accomplishment. Old time Canadiens fans who, it's a Stanley Cup or nothing, forget how many of those Stanley Cups were won when there's only 6 teams in the league and 2 rounds in the playoffs. It's tough to win the Stanley Cup in today's NHL. And Geoff Molson realizes that. And Hughes was on did a podcast, I think, with Pierre LeBrun recently, and he asked him how far away do you think you are from being like a legitimate playoff team in the playoffs, contending every year? And he said probably 3 years. And to me, that's new GMs come in. There's always a talk about sort of a 5-year plan. That's sort of the window that is expected, and I think that's what you need to look at here. They're off to a good start in this first year. If they get Connor Bedard in the draft sweepstakes, that'll speed up the process, or should speed up the process. But again, as I said, there's no guarantees from the draft. But it's something that had to be done because this team was going to keep spinning its wheels and maybe get in the playoffs, maybe not get in the playoffs. And right from day one, when Gorton and Hughes came in, they said their goal is to have a team that's in the playoffs basically every year. Sort of look at what the Boston Bruins have been. I think the Bruins have missed the playoffs twice in the last 12 years or something like that. So that's what they're building towards, and I think as I said, I think they're really on the right track. They're putting a high value on their younger prospects. It'll be interesting to see what happens during the offseason. Joel Edmondson's been able to stay healthy. I don't see him. I'm sure they'd like to move him. They would have liked to move him before the trade deadline, but they couldn't trade him because he'd been hurt. But there'll be changes heading into next season. As I said, then you sign Cole Caulfield, then we'll see what kind of money Hughes has left over. Drouin's coming off the books. Paul Byron's coming off the books, even though he's been on long-term injured reserve. He'll have some money to get some free agents if he wants at this point. But the thing I like about they're not in a rush. And I asked Molson in the interview, I said, how long do you think fans will be patient with this rebuild? And he said, I can't really answer that question. He says, I'm really thankful they've been so supportive so far, the support they've had for a team that's in 28th place. And as he said, that's not good enough. Is it 1 more year? Is it 2 more years? I figure next year fans will get a little antsy if they're in 28th place again. The year after that, I think the heat will get turned up more. And like if the year after that, if the third year from now that they're still there, I think that's when fans will start. You'll start hearing more boos at the Bell Center and more fans just getting upset. But the way things are going now, it's a pretty they're going to almost improve by 20 points this season, which is pretty good improvement.
Yeah.
Will they improve by that many points again next season? Maybe, probably not, maybe not. But it's hard to say right now because you don't know what's going to happen. A lot of things can change. Who would have thought the New Jersey Devils would be as good as they are this season after watching them last season? So we'll see. Let it play out a little bit.
So in the article, they say, well, he says, he was getting criticized for not being present in the media for a period in time. I think it was before Jeff Gorton was hired.
Yeah, it was from September, from the start of the 21-22 season, September until November when he fired Bergevin and brought in Gordon.
Yeah, so it's just I kind of feel for the guy in that sense when you're getting criticized for something like that because what I don't know, like what are people expecting him to say in his the team's reeling, the two franchise players are out of the lineup, like did he mention, like what did people want me to say, or
well, I think
what
part
could
of
I
it was
have
too,
said?
Bergevin was in the last year of his contract. There was all this talk: is he coming back? Is he not coming back? I remember I asked Bergevin one of his news conferences, "In a perfect world, do you want to come back?" And he said, "Yes, I do." So I think then people were looking for Geoff Molson. Well, do you want him back? Do you not want him back? What's going on here? But Molson, as he said to me, he wanted to let things play out. I mean, he signed Dominic Ducharme to a 3-year contract extension after the Stanley Cup final. He didn't give the extension to Bergevin, and in hindsight, it was a mistake giving the 3-year contract to Ducharme. But again, the coach just got to the Stanley Cup final. First coach to take the Canadiens to the Stanley Cup final since Jacques Demers. So it was sort of in I understand the dilemma he was in, but he, as he said, him and Bergevin just weren't on the same page anymore, type of thing, and it had been 9 years. So I think he knew he was. I said to him, and it's in the column. I said, how likely or how close were you to re-signing Bergevin? And he said, not really close. Like, so he knew that 9 years had been enough, and he knew he was going to make a change. But if things had gone really well and the Canadiens were surprisingly in a playoff spot and going strong, then maybe Bergevin might have got another year on his contract, but it didn't work out that way. So in hindsight, Molson did the right decision not re-signing him, letting things play out, and then pulled the trigger on and getting rid of him. But you got to remember too, Geoff Molson has been paying a lot of money to a lot of coaches not to coach the Canadiens. He was paying, he's paying Claude Julien $5 million a year for like 3 years not to coach them. Now he's paying Dominic Ducharme $1.3 million or whatever it is not to coach them for 2 more years. So I don't think he wanted to end up paying 2 GMs a lot of money at the same time. So he let things play out, and the way things played out, he decided to make the move, and Jeff Gorton was brought in, and we've seen what's happened since then.
Well, I think it's interesting because like the whole that was a big debate amongst just really anyone talking hockey. But I remember having this conversation with my friends, and like reading this article, I think it's I know he didn't say it, and you can never really say things definitively, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but to me it really reads like, had they lost to Toronto, it was done. Just like contextualizing the season, like all the moves that were made the off season before heading into the year, he, like, Bergevin straight up said, we're all in, like, this is it, and if you're all in and it doesn't work in the first round, you kind of put yourself in a corner.
Yeah, I mean, when I put that question to him, if they lost in that overtime in Game 6, and he said, "Well, that didn't happen, so it's hypothetical." Yeah. But just from the way he answered the question, it was like, if they had gone out in the first round, they shouldn't have even been in the playoffs. They were only there because of COVID. The same thing the year with the bubble playoffs, same thing happened. As he said, he knew vulnerable was the word he used. He knew he had a vulnerable team. So if they had lost in the first round, I don't think Bergevin would have been back. I think he would have eaten the last year of his contract. I don't think Ducharme would have got an extension on his. I think he would have been gone. I think there would have been a new coach, a new GM coming in then. Would have been Jeff Gorton and Marty St. Louis. Maybe it would have been Jeff Gorton. I don't think it would have been Marty St. Louis, because when I asked him about hiring a GM with no experience, he said, well, that was sort of part of the plan because they already had Jeff Gorton, who was already got 20-odd years, lots of experience. He rebuilt the Bruins. He rebuilt the Rangers. He's, they've got a guy. So they didn't need a GM with experience. In fact, it was probably better to have him without experience, because coming in fresh and sort of learning from Gorton and whatnot, that's what they got in Kent Hughes. But then when I asked him about, well, you also hired a coach with no experience, and he started chuckling. So, well, that wasn't part of the plan. But when Gorton came in and Molson and him were on the same page, and Gorton said, we're not going to change the coach this season. He said that.
Right.
But it got to the point, like, they had to. They had no choice. You couldn't. The players had stopped playing for him. Petrie was speaking for the locker room when he was criticizing Ducharme's system publicly. Guys weren't happy. You go back to the Stanley Cup run when Ducharme was out with COVID, and Ben Sherratt said we'd all skate through a wall for Luke Richardson. They never said that about Dominic Ducharme. So it just got to the point it was so bad. The guys didn't, Josh Anderson say it's no fun coming to the rink anymore. They had to do something. And as I mentioned before, they're already paying a lot of coaches money not to coach. Marty St. Louis got no experience coming in. He was willing to just take a contract until the end of the season. But Molson also said just the boost. He's such a positive guy, St. Louis. The boost he gave the team almost immediately was what they needed at that point. And then they waited until the end of the season, and they decided, this is Marty St. Louis, the guy we want to have moving forward. But Marty St. Louis wasn't in the plans for this rebuild. He wasn't he wasn't the coach. They said we're going to get Marty St. Louis next. As I think the words most used was like a perfect storm. They needed somebody quick. Marty was available. He's friends with Hughes. He's friends with Gorton. He knows them. They like him a lot. He was willing to come in. And I remember at the news conference when St. Louis was named coach, and he talked about, his mother used to always tell him, you show them, Marty, because he was he never drafted because he was too young, too short. Even when he was a kid, he was always told he was too short. He was going to never make it. And his mother always just told him, you show them, Marty. And then I remember his news conference, he said it's a similar situation. His mother sadly passed away, but he said, just give me the chance and I'll show you what you can do. And he did.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It really is, because you just go through, you painted a pretty good picture of the entire timeline of events. And then you just think if one thing goes differently, who again, like you said, like who knows who the coach of the Canadiens is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even, be able to begin to wager a guess, because when they fired Dominic Ducharme, it kind of felt like, because everyone knew that was coming. And did they announce that hiring at the same time as the firing?
Yeah, it was sort of, because they had to do something quick. And midway through a season, most of the coaches are already working. There's not a lot of choices. So I'm sure when they got together, Gorton and Hughes and Molson, I'm speculating here, but I'm sure they said, well, we got to make a coaching change. Like, who can we get? And then Hughes or Gorton said, well, how about Marty St. Louis? He's coaching kids. He even, if nothing more, just to lighten up the locker room. And walk in, and a guy who's going to walk into the room with instant credibility and instant respect. And I remember I read Pierre Gervais' book, The Former Canadiens Equipment Manager, and he said, people say Dominic Ducharme lost the room. He never lost the room because he never had the room. I don't think he ever had the respect of the players in the locker room. Luke Richardson did, but Marty St. Louis walks into a room. These guys at the age, they grew up watching this guy as a Hall of Fame player. He walks into the room, it'd be like almost like a Guy Lafleur walking into the room years before. Even if it didn't work out, he's got instant respect and instant people wake up and they listen. And, everybody I wasn't there, but everybody who was in the locker room, all the players and trainers, whatever, have talked about the speech that Marty gave when he first took over. It was like, wow. And I've said this, if Marty St. Louis wasn't a hockey coach, he could be a motivational speaker. He's a really smart guy. He's really thoughtful. He has a way of firing guys up. Sean Farrell, we were talking, gets called up for his first game and from the NHL, and he tells him, just go play. Go play, have fun, don't worry about it. 20 games in or whatever, we'll start working, telling you what you're doing wrong or what you're not doing wrong. And I think that was one of the biggest problems with people talk about how the Canadiens didn't develop players properly, and they didn't. And I think the biggest reason for that is that they just put too much pressure on young guys coming in, that you make one mistake, you're benched, or you're back in Laval, or you're gone. And Harvey-Pinard got called up last season. I think when Ducharme was coach, he played 4 games, scored 1 goal. He was gone back to Laval. And I think it's just guys were so afraid of making a mistake. And Victor Mete spoke about that after he left the Canadiens and went to Ottawa. Every time you get going to the bench and you're like scared, you knew you were going to get yelled at. And it was like you're just stressed. You're playing, and when you're playing like that, you're going to make more mistakes. And with the rebuilding team, especially, they can afford to let these young guys make mistakes. Right? Winning's not the number one priority right now. It's developing these players. So moving forward, we were talking about how long is this going to take, 2-3 years. right now is the building blocks for that, by allowing these young guys to just play free and make mistakes and learn and not worry about making mistakes, and having more freedom within the system that they didn't have with Ducharme. Ducharme was like, if the puck is here, you have to be there. Like, that's it. And
Yeah.
with Marty, if the puck's here, you have like 2 or 3 options of where you can be. He wants his players to read and react. But if you're going to have players read and react, they're going to make the wrong read once in a while. They're going to screw up. And they've taken the approach, the coaching staff, that's okay. They'd rather have them make the wrong read than be afraid to make a read. And I think for so long with the Canadiens' young prospects, they were playing afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah. And you know what? That's like that system of, or concept, I should say, of hockey. It's really that pays dividends, at least to me, just on the surface. I mean, what do I know? But to me, it reads like you need a lot of continuity, which is probably a good reason why they're putting a lot of their chips in their young players right now, because they're saying, like, they're, like you've said on this podcast before, they're learning, they're growing together, they're doing everything together. And if you're playing hockey that way, you're going to eventually learn. It's going to be first nature. You're going to have the options available to you. You're always, or 99% of the time, going to make the right read, because you're going to be faced with practically any situation when you're on the ice. And to have it cinder blocked into, this is what you have to do, it's not exactly the best. Whereas, you're given 2-3 options, you're just naturally making more reads. Kind of makes sense why all these players are developing very, very well under Martin St. Louis.
Well, we're talking about Sean Farrell coming up. I mean, for years, you got to get called up from Laval, an offensive style player. He'd get 6 minutes of ice time playing on the fourth line for 3 or 4 games, and then he gets sent back to Laval. So injuries have played into it this season also. But Sean Farrell, his second game in the NHL, is playing on the number 1 line with Nick Suzuki, getting 15 minutes of ice time. It's it's night and day. I mean, and injuries have played a role in that.
Yeah, of course.
But Marty St. Louis, like, as he said, go play with Nick Suzuki. Like, show me what you're an offensive player. Put him with an offensive player and see what he can do. If you take an offensive player like Sean Farrell, you put him on the fourth line with 2 pluggers, or the no knock on Michael Pezzetta. Michael Pezzetta is a solid fourth line player, but you put an offensive player with him, he's limited in what he's going to be able to do, right? So it's now you have a chance to play with some good offensive players and see what he can do. And this whole season and next season will be a similar type of thing also. You're going to see them. They're just, Slavkovsky, they didn't send him down. So I think it was a mistake with him. I think he should have gone down to Laval. I look at Justin Barron and the way he's been playing after starting the season in Laval. But they just want the guys to learn the experience. And from being in the locker room, it's a fun locker room to be around. Like, the guys like each other. You can tell they're having fun in the room. It's a young group. They're all around the same age. Carey Price and Shea Weber sucked up a lot of the oxygen in the room as veteran guys are sort of looking at them. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? It's a younger group of. They're almost like a group of brothers now. Gallagher's like one of the older brothers that. The clown brother type that they all joke with and kid with, but to me it's a much tighter group. It's a closer group now, and a lot of that has to do with they're all around the same age group. They have things in common. They're you see when after the game when we're going by the media room, you see some of the players, the young guys, their girlfriends are coming out and they're together too. They've created this so it's like a family environment they're creating right now as they're moving forward with this team.
And, we talk so much about, we've mentioned it a couple times of next season, and it's really interesting because, like, clearly some talent needs to be injected into the lineup. And I know they got a lot of young guys, but still you need vets on the team. That's just the way it works. It's just with all the young talent that there is, I think, for example, like, there's no better prime example than Arbor Xhekaj. I think he's very well proved that he is an NHL player.
Yeah.
Someone is going to be an odd man out. That's it's just a numbers game.
Well, that's what I think. Like,
on him. So it's how does that evaluation happen?
Yeah, I don't see them coming back with 3 vets. I don't see them coming back with Edmondson and Savard and Mike Matheson next year. I don't see them come back with 3 veterans. So, I'm sure they'd love to move Edmondson. I don't think they're going to move Savard, and they're not going to move Mike Matheson. But David Savard's been really good with the young guys. Really, he allows the young skating defenseman like a Caden Gooley the freedom to go up and down the ice because he's always back there, right? He's always taking care of things. But as I said, I'm almost positive they'll move Joel Edmondson during the offseason. If he remains healthy through the rest of the season, which so far he's played a string of games without his back going out, what they're going to get for him is another question. You know, they're going to get a first or second round pick with a wonky back on a guy like that. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, they got to start opening up spots for some of these younger guys to be able to play and get the ice time they need. And Jack-Eye, I mean, there's a guy who just came in and earned his spot. And this other thing Marty St. Louis has done is he has let guys earn spots. You know, Raphael Harvey-Pinard is, as St. Louis said, I didn't give him anything. He's earned all these. I didn't give it to him. He worked his butt off, and he deserved to get all these opportunities. Jack-Eye worked his butt off. I mean, in training camp, they wanted Justin Barron to make this team. I mean, they give him every opportunity at training camp to make the team. They give up Lehkonen. This was the key guy coming back in the Arturi Lehkonen trade. He wanted him to play for former first-round pick. But Jack-Eye was just better than him. So Jack-Eye started the season with the Canadiens, and Justin Barron went down to Laval, and it was the right decision. And it sends a message, too, when you do stuff like that to the Raphael Harvey-Pinards, the Jack-Eyes, the guys who were late-round picks or never drafted like Jack-Eye. If you come to Canadiens training camp next season and you work hard and you play really well, they will keep you. Like, they will give you a chance over a first-round pick. It doesn't really matter. It's whoever deserves a spot is going to get a spot. And we've seen it also with some of the healthy scratches that Marty St. Louis has made during the season. He hasn't been afraid to make Jonathan Drouin a healthy scratch, or Yoel Army, or some of the veterans let some of the younger guys play. And I think that goes well through the locker room. It makes the older guys realize you better skate. You can't take nights off because there's young guys coming up looking to take your job. And there's a lot of young guys right now in the Canadiens coming up to take their job. But you're right, they're missing. And Molson spoke about this too. They're missing, to win the Stanley Cup is everything's got to go perfect. You have a hot goalie, you never win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, of course.
You have to have 3 or 4 really solid defensemen, and you have to have like 5 really productive forwards. Productive offense. You have to have 2 lines that can produce offense. And Nick Suzuki is leading the Canadiens in scoring, but I haven't looked unless it's like 70th or 80th in that range in the NHL. Cole Caulfield's missed 30 games and he still leads the Canadiens in goals. So they need some more high-end talent. They're hoping Kirby Dach can develop into that. Slavkovsky, maybe Phil Massar. We'll see who they're going to get this year in the draft, but it's going to take time. You need to get a couple of guys that are up, top 20 type scorers in the NHL. The Canadiens haven't had a top 10 scorer in the NHL since Mats Naslund back in 85, 86, which is remarkable. So they need to get some more high-end talent. They might already have somebody. Cole Caulfield, how many, maybe he would have scored 40 goals or maybe even 50 this season if he had stayed healthy. But they need to get more high-end talent. And maybe they already have some of that in the system. It's going to take a while to develop. But at a point, they'll reach a point where they're ready to go get free agents. Maybe that's how they get them. And if you're an offensive-minded player, you probably want to play for Marty St. Louis. With the freedom to give and guys around the league see what's happened with Kirby Dach, and they see what's happened with Gurianov since he came here. He's slowed down a bit now, but just guys who you come here with the system he plays. Michael Pezzetta had a good chat with him, and he was saying, every time last season when he would get called up when Ducharme was coaching, it was like all they wanted him to do: get the puck over the red line, dump it in, and go chase it. That's what the system was for him. Chip it in and go chase it. And then Marty St. Louis says, no, if you have a chance to hang on to the puck, hang on to the puck and skate with it. And Pezzetta said he feels like he's back when he was a kid. And every player in the NHL was a really good hockey player when they were a kid. They have offensive ability, every single one of them. And Pezzetta says, I feel like almost like it's back being a kid again. Like I have some freedom to try and do stuff with the puck and try and make some plays. And we've seen how he's, Michael Pezzetta's never going to be a top 6 forward in the NHL, but he's going to be a fourth-line guy who, if he gets a chance, can bang one in. And isn't afraid to, it's not just chip and chase all the time or dump it in and go get it. There's options, or they're allowed to make plays.
Well, that's it, and especially the case is with Michael Pezzetta, because where do you go from there? Because this team clearly values hard work, and it's great to see, like you said, it doesn't matter if you're a first round pick or a late round, you are valued the same way. You deserve an opportunity. You're going to get the opportunity. So, I guess hopefully it comes to a point where, players that aren't exactly offensively gifted as others that the hard work kind of, it's a hard thing to balance, because like at what point does the hard work not really matter all that much because of the talent that's injected into your roster, because if you're better served with one player versus another. So it's interesting that in the case of Pizzetta, because we know that he's not like you said, he's not traditionally an offensive player, but exactly it. It's just every one of these guys, when they were in Pee Wee or Bantam, they were scoring 30 goals in 20 games. That's what they were doing, and that's why why they're in the NHL.
Big George Larac was an offensive star, like scored a lot of goals when you're playing midget hockey. It's just that you have to have skill. You have to have skill to get to it. It's interesting. I was talking with a former NHL player recently. He was telling me that what a lot of guys that you're talking about, Pizzetta and the fourth line guys, and so you'd see guys that come up and they're not used to being a fourth line player, right? Because nearly every guy in the NHL was a first line player coming up, right? They weren't a fourth line player; they became a fourth line player. Torrey Mitchell, an example. I've known Torrey since he was a little kid. He was a superstar player as a kid. He was a big star at University of Vermont. Comes to the NHL, he had like a 10-year career as a fourth line center. He was, he was a first line player his whole way up. So there's so many guys like that. And the former NHL player I was talking to he says sometimes it's hard for guys like that to realize that just because you didn't get a point in the game doesn't mean you didn't have a really good game. And he said, it's like if you have a shift, if you're a fourth liner, you have a shift, you get off the ice and the other team didn't score, that's a good shift. If you have 9 shifts like that in a game, you had a good game. Your fourth liners aren't there. They're not the guys paid money to put the puck in that. But when you have a guy in the fourth line, when he gets an opportunity, he can. So if you have a fourth liner who finishes a game +1, he's had a good game. Like that's a good game. And he said it's hard sometimes for guys who their whole life have been number one line players to accept your fourth line player, and B, learn what that role is. And Michel Therrien, one of the lines he had that I used to like, he says, there's different chairs on a team, and you have to find which chair that you fit into, whether the rocking chair or lounger, whatever the chairs you use, but you got to find the chair that you fit into. And if you can find a way, mentioned Torrey Mitchell, he played like a 10-year career in the NHL by being a fast guy who could play on the fourth line, win faceoffs, and kill penalties. Made a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, and that's it. And that saying that Michel Therrien reminds me of a saying that my brother-in-law always says. He always tells me this because I always laugh whenever he says it. That it makes a lot more. It sounds a lot better in Hebrew than it does in English, which is you can't sit with one ass on 2 chairs. And it goes to the same as playing in the NHL. Like you gotta stay in your lane, but. Well, that doesn't mean you can't take your opportunities, and you can't, like you said, you can't put you were once able to put the puck in the net. You did not lose that ability.
Yeah, Larber Jack, I was talking about earlier. He's not going to be a top pairing defenseman in the NHL, but he fills a role. He's a big guy. He's physical. He's hard to play against. He'll fight if there's not as much fighting in the NHL now, but he'll fight. And you can even when he was on the power play, he's really good at getting a shot through from the point. He's really good at finding lanes and getting the puck through. He has abilities. So, and again, I think a lot of people don't realize just how good every single player in the NHL is. Even the fourth liner was the worst guy in an NHL team. 90% of the time was the best player on his team coming up as a kid.
It's just the classic. Just put them out on the ice on a beer league game on your Tuesday night league. Watch them turn you inside out and make you look absolutely silly.
Well, during one of the lockouts, I played old timers hockey at LCC, and a lot of guys grew up with Gord Donnelly. And Gord Donnelly played a long time in the NHL. He's a scout now, and he was like a fourth line guy. And he came out. This is back when we were younger. I was maybe my late 20s, I'm going to say, maybe early 30s. And he came out with us, and oh my God, he was so good. And some of the guys were shocked, like, oh my God, I can't believe he's so good. I said, he plays in the NHL. He's a professional hockey player. He's good. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, like even I remember going to see some of my friends' beer league games, and they would have a sub. The other team would have a sub, and that person happened to play in the queue, far and away the best player on the ice, and it's like not even close. And the guy couldn't crack the NHL. All of us saying, he sucks. Well, he just made all of you look very, very silly.
Exactly.
Anyways, the Sick Podcast is brought to you by Playground. Major poker festivals are back at Playground. The March Million features 10 ring events and $1 million in guaranteed prize pools, including a $400,000 guaranteed main event Play in Playground's March Million Poker Series from March 23rd to April 2nd. Visit playground.ca for details. Also, the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro's Tascam equipment is supplied by Ericsson Audio, the choice of musicians, engineers, and broadcast professionals such as myself. Let's talk about it. I mean, this kind of was squashed in, I feel like it was squashed in a matter of hours, but it popped up on Twitter, and things on Twitter are sometimes fun. Why not talk about it? I don't know if you saw this, but Tony and George Larac spoke briefly about this last night. Jeff Gorton, apparently he's getting bored with his job and, not even almost not a year and a bit into it. That was squashed pretty quickly, I think, right? I mean,
well, I think it was Nick Kypreos. I heard something about it. I think it was Nick Kypreos maybe reported, was what I heard.
Yeah.
Originally. I mean, I don't know what source he would have. I mean, I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, is it possible? I guess. I mean, Gordon's used to being this is a new, executive vice president of hockey operations, the GM under him. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, I just spoke with Geoff Molson yesterday. We talked about how well, all three of them work, but maybe he's. It's hard to even speculate. I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's, I haven't heard anything about it. So, but I guess we'll see moving forward what happens.
Perfect. That's actually the precise amount of time I would have liked to spend on that topic. All right. This one was interesting that came across today. Raphael Harvey-Pinard signed with an agency. I believe it was Cortex.
It's Kent. It's Kent Hughes' old agency.
Well, there you go. So that's probably meaning he wants to enter into negotiations with the Canadiens because, I mean, this is something another thing I've been talking about. Like players like Raphael Harvey-Pinard are, for the most part, just they're pretty, for the lack of a better term. He's a great player, but at the end of the day, your team's not gonna go under without Raphael Harvey-Pinard. I mean, the Canadiens might because they have no players, but that's another story. But if you're a full roster, so you see a guy like that, and he's valuable to the Canadiens right now. But my question is like, what's the vision for Raphael Harvey-Pinard? Contract
wise? Well, right now he's playing on a 2-way contract. And I looked it up the other day. I believe it's $825,000 in the NHL, and it's either $70,000 or $80,000 in the AHL. It's one of the two. I can't remember. I think it's 80, but it's either 80 or 70. Yeah. He's not going to be making $80,000 or $70,000 next year. I think he's done enough to warrant a one-way. I'd be shocked. He's a restricted free agent, or can become a restricted free agent. I can't see why the Canadiens wouldn't want to keep him.
Yeah,
I mean the way he's scoring goals, and it's not just the way he scores goals. He's willing to go to the dirty areas. He's I was talking with Belzile the other day, and Belzile played with him in Laval, and he said in Laval everybody wanted to play on his line, and now in the Canadiens, guys want to play on his line. Maybe Nick Suzuki, I just mentioned about him playing with Nick Suzuki. He just does all the little things right. He's a younger version of Brendan Gallagher. He really is. I mean, in Laval, his nickname was Lavaliger. He's very similar style. I think he's got a little bit more better hands than Gallagher. He can score from a little bit further away from the net, but he's also French Canadian. I mean, there's obviously an added value in this franchise. They like to have local guys around. So yeah, I mean, is he going to break the bank? No, but if I was representing Raphael Harvey-Pinard, I'd be looking for a one-way contract, and I'd be looking for a term because you never know how long he's going to be able to do this. He's not a big guy. You'd be looking for. I think you'd be probably looking for like a 3-year contract. In the I'm saying 1.2 million area, maybe somewhere around that. But here's a kid who was making $70,000 in Laval. Here's a kid during COVID who was delivering pizzas for his father's pizza restaurant. This is his opportunity to not become super rich, but become a millionaire.
Be pretty darn comfortable.
Be able to make money that he'll be comfortable and sort of take a deep breath and say, okay, I've got some serious money coming in here now. But I mean, at this point, I can't see why the Canadiens wouldn't want to keep him. I mean, once you get to 30 games, it's not so much a flash in the pan anymore. And he can score goals different ways. And I'd say he's the younger version of Brendan Gallagher. So, I'd be surprised the Canadiens don't re-sign him and keep him here. I can't see why they would want to lose him.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with the dollar figure. I'm gonna get probably demolished in the comment section for saying this. But I'm gonna say it because it's just the connection that I make is like you said, his nickname in Laval was Lavaliger.
Mm-hmm.
Brendan Gallagher was, beloved by fans before all the injuries took place. He's potting 30 goals a year. He only did it twice in his career, but he's always in the mid to high 20s. And I don't know. I always equated him as the poor man's Brad Marchand because he's a thorn in the side, but he can put the puck in the net and he's a skilled guy. Who knows? Maybe Raphael Harvey-Pinard, like you said, he's got better hands than Gallagher. He could, I'm not going to say he's going to become Brad Marchand, be a 100-point scorer, but he could be, on the high end, if you're getting a 50-point guy out of him, 40, even 45, 40 out of him on a full season, that's a pretty darn good deal for 3 years at that price.
Well, he's also a guy who can move up and down the lineup. As I mentioned before, guys want to play. The guys want to play with him. You can put him on first, second, third, fourth line. You can put him on power play. You've seen him out killing penalties. He can do a lot of different things. He's a valuable type of player, and he's shown the ability to score goals and over an extended period in the NHL, not just a fluke. At this point, it's not just a fluke. I mean, he's on pace. I did the math the other day. He's on pace for a 36-goal season if you did it over 82 games.
Yeah.
The shooting percentage is way up there. It's not a sustainable shooting percentage. But, I mean, can he score 20 goals in the NHL? It certainly looks like he could. He's got about 40. Well, he's tied for fourth on the Canadiens in goals, and he's only played like 30 games. So that goes back to what I was saying before, how they need some more offensive, high-end offensive talent. But if you have like a Harvey-Pinard is a third-line guy going forward who can, pot you 15 to 20 goals, there's value in that. As we were talking before with those chairs, you find the chair that you fit in, and he fits in more than one chair. Like I said, he's a valuable player.
He does.
You move him down the lineup, you can kill penalties, you play power play, so that adds value.
Yeah, he could sit on many chairs with his behind for sure. As my
brother and the Canadiens from the management standpoint, they might be able to cash in on their end a little bit here because he's a kid I'm sure likes playing in Montreal and would love the local kid looking for a one-way contract, I'm sure. So you're talking about, we're talking about, Carolina banking on Kotkaniemi with that deal that he's going to improve and become a bargain moving forward. They're not going to give him Kotkaniemi money, obviously.
Of course.
But if they can sign him to a 3-year deal, and then he does become a Gallagher and a 30-goal scorer a couple of years from now, he'd be a huge bargain, like Brendan Gallagher was when he was scoring 30 goals. He was a bargain. That's what led to the contract he has now, which is he's not a bargain now. But as I've said before, Brendan Gallagher's earned every single dollar he's ever got from the Canadiens because his effort level is there all the time.
So last one for you before we get you out of here. This one I found very interesting. It happened today. And the reason why I found it interesting is, it connects to the opening of the show of Dollard Desormeaux and Devin Levi. The Canadiens signed a goaltender to an entry-level contract today, Jakob Dobes out of Ohio State. I checked him out. Listen, I haven't seen much footage on him, but I saw the stats. Stats look good, similar to what Devin Levi had at Northeastern. The interesting part of why it connects to Dollard Desormeaux is because there's another goaltender out there in the university hockey world up for a Hobey Baker nominee, I should say. Yaniv Peretz, born in Dollard Desormeaux. I don't know. It seemed kind of like a match made in heaven. Were you surprised? Have you heard anything of about this, like on this subject of entry level contract goaltenders or anything like that?
I'm wondering what's in the water in the West Island with all these goalies coming out of there.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's
crazy. It's crazy. Well, the thing is, the Canadiens' goaltending situation as they move forward in this rebuild is going to be they got to answer for who's going to be the goalie of the future.
Right.
It's not going to be Jake Allen because he's going to be gone by the time they get to the point where they hope to be competing, like you mentioned earlier, every year for the playoffs and being a competitive team. Could it be Samuel Montembeault? Maybe. the way he's played this year, it's possible. Caden Primo, that was a weird situation where they called him up to play that one game and then sent them back down. But next season at training camp, if the Canadiens want to send Caden Primo down to Laval, he's got to clear waivers. So there's a chance they lose him for nothing. So were they putting him in a game because maybe there's another team that is interested in maybe acquiring him and wanted to see him play an NHL game, or it's sort of hard to factor in what was going on there. But goaltending situation, is Caden Primo the goalie of the future? He was given that sort of tag for a while.
Yeah, when he signed.
You gotta wonder he hasn't, if that's still the case. So I think the Canes are at a point right now where they can't have too many goalies type of thing. Like, let's get some young prospects and see what we can do, and maybe we can get lucky. They're not going to pay $10.5 million again for a goalie like they do with Carey Price. That just makes no sense in today's salary cap world. So it's just, I guess they're just trying to see. Goalies are weird. I mean, there's guys that they're great for a season and they disappear. And they're Jim Carey. I remember Steve Penny back with the Canes when he was amazing in the playoffs, and then he did. So the more I'm guessing that the Canadiens, that they're figuring, sign some of these young prospect goalies and we'll see what we got. As you said, they could lose Caden Primo either if they put him on waivers next season and another team claims him. Maybe nobody will claim him. They just put him back to Laval. But they got to be prepared that if they lose Primo or they trade him or they lose him on waivers, they got to have some other options. Not just for the Canes. We got to have somebody to play goal in Laval also.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the lineup is out, I think. So do we have a starter for tomorrow?
I'm not sure. I didn't. Herb covered practice today because I was writing the Molson stuff, so I don't know if Marty announced who his goalie is going to be tomorrow.
Right. So, I mean, at the very least, we will find out. At least if we don't know now, we will find out before the game tomorrow against Carolina. Stu, I hope you enjoy that game, and I hope you enjoy the beginning, middle, and end of your weekend. Thanks very much for joining.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks. That was Stu Cowan. I am Matt Ohayon. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there, and we would appreciate the support. I'm getting noticed in the Mile End by random people that I never would have dreamed of being noticed by on the street. That's how large the Sick Army is, and that's how great all of you guys are. All right, that's it for me. Tony's back on Monday. I'll catch you next Friday.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. LaVita.tb. Embrace your true nature.